Hi, everybody, and welcome to SBCA's Member Connection, where we dive into the value of SBCA membership and the people who help shape our industry. Today, we're joined by Christine Wagner to talk about SBCA and how we advocate for component manufacturers in the industry. Welcome, Christine.
Thanks, Abby. Happy to be here.
So let's start with the basics. What does advocacy mean in the context of SBCA and the structural components industry?
Our advocacy efforts cover a variety of aspects, so we have multiple levels or layers to our advocacy efforts. You start out with our national level, where we're raising awareness to the U.S. lawmakers, agencies, other organizations about those industry-specific issues, while promoting the use of components as a solution to some of them, like housing affordability, for example. Then we go into our state and chapter level, where SBCA chapters can get engaged by connecting with their local representatives, connecting with their local areas about component use and adoption, and then any other local market concerns they may have. The third piece of our advocacy efforts are codes and standards. So that's where we connect with our technical committees or E&T committee and our advocacy together to voice our stances, our opinions, our thoughts on those code proposals and changes, whether in offense or defense of those specific things that are brought up. So it's really important that SBCA and the structural building components industry's voice is heard through all of these efforts.
So if I'm a component manufacturer or supplier, either a member or a non-member of SBCA, why should I care about advocacy efforts that we're doing?
So advocacy is at the root of what we're doing, right? It is how we voice what this industry does. A component manufacturer, a framer, a supplier, anyone in this industry, this will impact you because this is your business and your daily life. Our goal is to increase the adoption of trusses across the country, help various groups such as builders, code officials, architects, lawmakers, anybody else understand why this is, in fact, the best way to frame, like many of you know. Component manufacturers and or suppliers or anyone else related, you're directly affected by this because the more people that adopt the use of components and want to use trusses in their build, the more business opportunities you're going to have. So our advocacy efforts help demonstrate the significant role that the structural building components industry and framing industries play in those issues, in creating jobs, in improving building safety, affordable and sustainable housing, and driving the economic growth.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Not that many people, I don't think about that background piece of it, of who is driving the change in the industry, who's driving those adoption pieces. So in that same vein, what are some current policy or regulatory issues that SBCA is tracking or working on right now?
So we all heard it, right? The big button topics right now are tariffs, immigration, affordable housing. Those are the top three things that we spoke on in DC, which we can talk a little bit about later, but those are really the topics that affect not only us and this industry, but the overall construction industry, structural framing, the industry, and all of that. So we're monitoring these. We're keeping up with any legislation that comes through, any news pieces that come through. You'll see that on our website and industry news as we learn more too.
Yeah, so you mentioned DC. When we look at sharing our recent success stories where advocacy made a real impact, I know DC is one of those for you. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of what happened in DC and how that made an impact in our advocacy efforts?
Yeah, so back in June this year, we led a legislative fly-in to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., where we had SBCA members and our leadership group come together to bring these specific issues such as tariffs, immigrations, affordable housing to Capitol Hill and express how this was impacting us, how it's affecting us, how it's affecting the components industry, and to help and provide solutions to how to potentially work on those issues collectively between the individual members that attended, our leadership group, and any other group meetings we had. We had over 20 meetings with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, which over half of them are with the actual lawmakers themselves, which was a really great accomplishment.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Especially since this was our first time back in over a decade. So It was a really successful event. we're looking into what a legislative fly-in looks like in the future as a continuous and ongoing effort, and how to best capitalize on these relationships we've started to rebuild and reform this past year.
Yeah. So, how does SBCA working with government agencies, code bodies, other trade groups, how do those relationships happen? How do we work with those different groups?
Our SBCA E&T committee is led by co-chairs Howard Gager and Tim Noonan, and they are the ones that monitor these code changes. They're part of the proposal process and the updating process, in addition to our SBCA staff's technical director, Greg Greenlee, who is also part of the committee, and he's a good resource for them, helps execute strategy as SBCA staff. Greg is also on the ALSC as a contributing member to that, and provides a voice as SBCA at that table. So through this, we're working on building relationships with these other organizations, other groups, other folks in this industry that expand a little bit beyond trusses and wall panels and components themselves, and are working with them so that, these groups who are also impacted by codes and standards, the changes and the laws, if we all come together and we build that coalition, then we can make more change, because the more people that come to the table, the more change you can make.
What are the risks if our industry doesn't show up in these conversations? If SBCA suddenly, which isn't going to happen, stops advocacy efforts?
If we can get ahead of this, make these connections, build these relationships, and become a solid resource for lawmakers, agencies, architects, engineers, code officials, building officials, and other groups to utilize and rely on us when making decisions on housing and construction and anything else related to that, then we can be there on the offense and helping make the change, versus letting that change happen to us and then having to react on it versus be at the front end of it.
So if I am an SBCA member and I'm listening to this conversation thinking, man, this sounds great, I want to get involved in advocacy, which should be everybody listening, obviously. How can members get involved or support these efforts? Do they have to go to the legislative fly-ins to make a difference? What other options are there?
It's important to connect with your local offices and your local communities. That is where you'll make the biggest and most impactful difference. Because the best way to get involved and advocate for what you're doing is to invite those folks back to your facility, to your trust plant, or wherever it is you are and what you're doing, and show them exactly what you do, how you're contributing to the community and society, and how you can become or are a trusted resource for them. Because making these connections is the best way to start and to make a difference in the future. Because this is actually how we got some of those meetings in DC. Some folks had connections that they made locally, and then we were able to meet with those specific actual lawmakers. So if you make connections locally, it's going to impact you in a much broader sense than you can possibly imagine. Right?
So as we're looking at staying updated in advocacy, how can people stay up to date on what we're doing and how they can help spread that messaging?
If you're not already, you should subscribe to SBCA Media. We put out pertinent and up-to-date information and news on a variety of things through SBCA's Industry News, which is weekly on Tuesdays, NFC's Framing Today, which is twice a month on Wednesdays, through SBCA Magazine, which comes out every other month, NFC's Framing Today magazine, which comes out every quarter, and then we also have our weekly podcast, Component Connection, which covers topics from lumber to education to everything in between. So those are all fantastic resources to make sure you're in the know and staying aware of what's going on. So if you go to our website, go into the media section and see all the different things we have to offer, you can choose and select which things you want to subscribe to, or all of them, which is what I recommend, and then be a part of those various media outlets and really get involved with us. You can also reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to help get you signed up for any of that as well.
What's on the horizon? Any big issues we should be preparing for now as we wrap up our conversation about advocacy?
In September, though, HUD is bringing back the Innovative Housing Showcase to the National Mall, where SBCA will be exhibiting. So that'll be another really good opportunity for us to advocate for the use and adoption of components and share that knowledge on what they are, the benefits of them, and anything else that people may need to know. The other big thing that we're doing is looking into setting up a PAC, which is a political action committee, to help have that better impact at the national level as an
Mm,
association. But regardless of if there are any hot button issues, which there always will be, there will never be a time when there isn't, right? It's always going to be a thing.
mhm.
We should always be advocating, like I said earlier, we should always be advocating for what SBCA and its members and this industry does and provides. Because we all know that building with structural building components, such as roof trusses, floor trusses, and wall panels, is the best way to frame, but it's our job to share that and to share why.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christine. I think we all learned a lot about advocacy, and we appreciate your time. And hopefully, we'll see all of you next time on Member Connection.